Barak Bashad. May the blessings be. I am continuing the 1435 summary and commentary on the Easy Way Discourses by Harold Klemp, with the 14th of the 10th month of 1435 paper entitled 3 Mana Aloud, 3 Mana Silent Spiritual Exercise, and the Easy Way Discourses, Lesson 5. And Lesson 5 would be called Reincarnation, Why You Came to Earth Again, and religious freedom laws are kept in that I am reporting on this. So it's the fair use laws come under that heading. But religious freedom, Harold Klemp says to write as if you were the living Eckmaster. Now, regardless of some of the things that may imply, I think it's clear to those, at least those who subscribe to the channel, that I have at least the spiritual authority as Harold Klemp actually has. Now, claiming to be a god and the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, I'm not claiming that for myself. I know I don't have the following that he does. But I could someday. But when Paul Twitchell and certainly Darwin Gross and Harold Klemp said things that surprised others, it was usually interpreted as uncovering a truth. I would agree that Paul G. was not an incarnation of the founder of Christianity, Paul. Some of the other statements must be true too. The husband of Paul Twitchell's sister testified that she was told by Paul on her deathbed that the right religion to join was not Eckankar. And another testified Gail Twitchell had admitted her husband was a fraud, and so was his teaching. Yeah, Paul Twitchell, I think it was actually, he was asked on his deathbed what religion should be joined. Ignoring these, Harold Klemp asserts Paul Twitchell knew that rebirth into another human body is a fact of life. I think it would be nice to know what is meant by Paul making problems for himself by wanting to know another side of God. The Key to Eckankar by Paul Twitchell and many other Eckankar books will claim a knowledge of a truth that doesn't get shared, at least in that book. It is true that the more one knows, the more one knows they don't know. Teachings should get one involved in matters that are not unique to the group. How many times is it appropriate to claim knowledge that can be spoken about, but really isn't? Do we really need a belief in reincarnation to explain birth defects, the death of young adults, injury, accidents, failed relationships, bad health, that there are poor people and unhappiness? I mean, really? How can a soul be created and not have a beginning, as Harold Klemp says, was revealed to him. Would we really stop existing if we were no longer loved by God? Instead of a God who transcends time, in Eckankar, God seems to wait to make a plan till humans exist. Oh, till humans act. Same thing, right? It is obvious that at some point in our existence, experience was lacking. Matter, energy, time, and space were said to be created then. Light and sound as aspects of Ek divided the lower 5 to 8 and the higher 7 and the higher 6 to 7 worlds. The lower light and sound as aspects of Ek divided the lower 5 to 8 and higher 6 to 7 worlds. Light and sound. Oh, the number varies per Eckankar explanation of the worlds, but one is said to have 5 bodies to experience, at least the physical, astral, causal, mental, and etheric worlds that most would have to admit sounds like all the same body. Paul Twitchell's explanation of the earth world, mountain world, and desert world all sound like he is speaking of the material world. Our ultimate goal in Eckankar is called becoming a co-worker with God. That is living according to one's purpose. Harold Klemp claims to recall many past lives that are relevant to his life. We can all admit he has now. The idea is that everyone has thousands of lives to his credit in the lower worlds. You know, the astral through the etheric. Harold Klemp says that he has been female and male in various forms and roles. Whatever condition and form we have placed been placed in is to teach us. Be ready to give up more. Be ready to give up mere opinions. In face of experience or knowledge, we should develop a flexibility in our attitudes too. Give others, even enemies, credit for what we have achieved. Love or aversion that we can't fully explain is attributed to interaction in a past life and Eckankar teaching. Are we to learn of past lives much in the way people learn of the existence of other places and people? Is everyone really confronted with clear evidence of reincarnation frequently, or is there other explanation for these things attributed to reincarnation? I haven't heard of a single case that was actually, that it couldn't be explained otherwise. Can't we think hardship can lead to good with only one life for all to live? Eckankar doesn't seek to prove reincarnation. Indoctrination based on hints of proof beyond their own feelings is how it is addressed. Do we have to learn to depend on ourselves as a soul that is only with this body in life? In Christianity, our identity as souls and many other beliefs are shared with Eckankar. despite how much Harold Klemp and other members of the corporation pretend that churchgoers believe things like the soul isn't us, but something we own. Well, saying my soul, my spirit, I mean, come on, it's a way of speaking. It doesn't mean that, well, it's not me. When I talk about my soul, I'm not talking about me. Yeah, right. Can't think of anybody who's ever meant it that way. If that is true, that is only because they call the core self the spirit. Through this and detachment, we can stop fearing death and also the growling of our stomachs. This is said to be a time where we're greeted by a loved one. An Eckankar Corporation member is taught that the current head of the corporation meets them and takes them past the Dharam Raya, or judge of those departing the physical plane, to face the results of his judgment. But then, one is still taught all one's merits and demerits? Why? Isn't that still a judgment day? Eckankar then teaches, all are then educated and sent to the new life they deserved. Page 49 teaches it is usually the astral realm, and elsewhere, in Eckankar works that is described as realms where one burns off karma and is otherwise punished. Why don't you say that people who aren't in your path go to hell? And just rephrase it. You are doing the same thing. In Islam, one learns that many who are not legally from al-Muslimin because they have not accepted all of God's messengers and prophets in humanity, and are not only actual al-Muslimin or submitters to God, but beyond that, as mu'minin, are believers. So, titles are secondary, and before I get to lesson 6, and I will go through I will list out all the names of the discourses before I finish the series. But lesson 5, some would say the most important part of any of these lessons, is the spiritual exercise. Page 49 and 50 of the Easy Way Discourses by Harold Klemp has the 5th month's spiritual exercise. I started practicing this on Monday, the 10th of June, 2013, as I went to sleep after sunrise. The practice is to say the word for the causal plane thrice aloud in a group and thrice silent in a group. This is done repeatedly for 10 or more minutes. Manna, manna, manna. Or manne, manne, manne. In Eckankar, the pronunciation of this key word is listed as ma-ne or ma-na, and spelt M-A-N-E. M-A-N-A. The claim is the practice will help you glimpse a past life. 2. And there, or later, in a dream. Is it the impulse? Is the impulse to stop the leader of Eckankar's promptings, or yourself? The word should make you think of memory, but does that really mean anything you recall from the experience of a past life memory? This time around, I experienced dreams of being in one place and shifted to one side or the other. In the night of Friday, August 1st, I picked up this practice as a part of my sleeping for another period of days. I said it as mana as I went to sleep between 6:07 and 9:25 a.m. on Monday the 11th of August 2014, are the first and second hours of the day in the 14th of the 10th month of 1435. I became cool and numb. I found myself sailing through milky white seas full of neon purple bits. We sailed on to a land where the only life beyond algae was around and found, while the mother seemed to be following a pattern where she found none. There was a feeling and sight of nothingness that I was pulled into. I pulled a sextant out of my pocket. And found myself sailing through a green sea with glowing yellow spheres when I adjusted it. I saw 2 bears floating around in the sky. I had different feelings as they rotated about. I was again sucked into a place of nothingness. I saw a large male snake go through a countryside that was left very muddy after a monsoon. It ate as it went, but retreated into a cave when things dried up again. I was, for a third time, sucked into a place of nothingness. I found myself in the Temple of Ek at Chanhassen, Minnesota, by the Amethyst Fountain. A 7-headed female snake popped up out of the fountain. This being glowed faintly of purple with orange spots. It reached unto the ceiling. I stepped upon a crab that I didn't notice. I was sucked for a 4th time into a place of nothingness before returning to find the fountain surrounded by 6 light yellow tiles. On its walled side that the staircase goes around, each had one of the Shamhamporosh sigillium for the period of Cancer, are numbers 27 through 32, in clockwise order around the low fountain. I stood between 2 rows of 6 tiles before me and a row of 6 tiles behind me. The 6 before me were of the Goetia symbols for the period of Cancer, are numbers 27 through 32. The 6 behind me were of the period for Gemini, are numbers 21 through 26. The front right one was yellow. The front center one was orange. The left one on the first row was silver. The second row was forest green. The right one of the second row would flash between forest green and turquoise blue, and the back row on the left side was a tile that flashed between red and orange. The one to the right of that would flash between red and turquoise blue. The third and sixth tile was forest green. The fourth tile was silver. The fifth tile would flash between red and orange. The flashing tiles with Goetia Sigilia numbers 21, 22, 25, and 27 would flash red at the same time. I heard a voice tell me, "Never before were you incarnated in the physical body, and never will you again be reincarnated." I was sucked into a place of nothingness for a fifth time. I awoke with my heart beating fast, and remain more awake than my sleep hours would be giving me. And we have the attribute of the tiles here. Moon, Mercury, Sun. Moon or Mars, Venus or Jupiter, Mercury or Mars, Jupiter or Mars, Venus, Moon, Mars or Mercury, Venus. And that would be 30, 31, 32, 27, 28, 29, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And then we move on to the interpretation. And the 5 periods symbolize that it was the 5th of Lunasa, or the cooling quarter, or what used to be called fall. I didn't believe in reincarnation in the first place, but the saying was an inner confirmation of the truth of this belief. The back row was the symbols to renounce the evils of the period of Gemini and the associated entities. The row right before me was of the first period of Cancer, which I was in. The first row of 3 tiles was of the second half of the 12th year of Cancer. Okay. Second half of the 12th of the part of the year about Cancer. Okay. No, the approximate August. These 2 rows of 3 are symbols against the evil. These 2 rows of 3 are symbols against the evils of Cancer and the associated entities. The light yellow tiles were the aspirations of mutable air, or the period of Cancer, and identification with the associated light beings or unfallen angels. The crab, that's the symbol of the constellation of Cancer. Here, it's the backwards entities that are against me, but have been defeated by me without even noticing. The constellation of Cancer is supported by Hydra and Hydrus as the second decanta. The female snake, or Hydra, is the 7 of Swords, as the futility of completely eliminating the sublimation of groups like Eckankar upon their believers completely. Even when more fell away during the life than our members, and almost as many died as members as currently are ones.
Eckankar constantly adds new members. The colors of the female snake were as the attributes of Pluto, and Mercury for Hydra, and the Seven of Swords. The floating bears and use of the sextant was as the constellations Ursa Major, or the big bear, Ursa Minor, or the little bear, and sextans, or sextant, as the Sixth of Swords, as the science of state of being, feelings and emotions. The 5 times in the place. Without feeling, our sight is as Antilla, or the air pump. The bear cub was as Ursa Minor, or Major, or the 5 of Cups, as the intellect and disappointment. The sailing in a white and purple sea was as Argo, or the ship as the 8 of Swords, as investigations and being removed was interference. I focused on the sails, and that is as the constellation Vela, or the sails of Argo Navis. The yellow and green seas were as the attributes of Canis Minor, or the 6 of Swords, as the first decanta of Cancer. And that's it with my interpretation. And when I share my experiences and concepts, feel free, share your own interpretation. When I go over scriptures or claims to religious history, also share your concepts. I had a star chart that would be by the bed, and I would look up on occasion what these constellations were, what the symbolism was, and thus, without worshipping stars, I would have experiences like unto people who actually do worship the stars and have their dreams and stuff, but you don't have to worship them. They're just themes, and you work through those themes, and you study those things before going to bed, and they merge with your spiritual practices. And like I said in the religious science of sleep, there are certain ways to never ever have a nightmare again, as far as the spiritual influence ones, but there are people who go through trauma and they have to have flashbacks, and that's whatever. But go Eck yourself.